We continue now at the top of Daf Ches Amud Beis in Meseches Bava Kamma. This is Bava Kamma Daf 98b. And the previous Amud Rabbah said that if a person burns the shtaros of his friend, he is patur, because that is considered to be indirect damage. In terms of what he did physically, he just burned a piece of paper. And in terms of the fact that the person can't use the shtar to collect the debt, so that's just an indirect kind of damage. Because I burned that piece of paper, because I burned your shtar, now you can't go collect money from someone else. The halach is grama ben izikin is patur. When it comes to indirect damages, causation, we say the person is patur, and therefore Rabba says in this case the person who burned the shtaros is in fact patur. And Rami Bar Chama asks, what exactly is the case in this situation? If there are witnesses that know my hava b'shtara, what was written in the shtar, so we have witnesses that can testify that this piece of paper was a shtar that could collect a certain amount of money, so then lichtvu le shtar malya, those witnesses might as well just write him a new shtar. It doesn't make any difference that you can't collect with this particular shtar, just write a new shtar. Now, if there are no witnesses and nobody knows what was written on this piece of paper except for the person who's claiming that it was a shtar, the person who had this piece of paper, so anon menoya dinan. So how would we even know what was in the shtar? Even if we held grama was chayiv, there'd be no way to make the person pay unless there's evidence of what was written in the shtar. And the Gemara answers, Amar Rava says, Tehei b'ma'amino, just understand the case to be where the person already admitted he trusted him in terms of what was written in the shtar. Rashi says, Menoya dinan my havak sibe. How do we know what was written there? Umay boy lemesve. How do we know how much is owed, even if it was a case where the person is chayiv? V'lo itzrich le'lemeimar de pater. Rabba doesn't even need to say pater in this case. And then Rabba said, b'ma'amino, it's a case where he trusts him. And the Meseches Hashas does change the girsa over here. It's the b'ma'amino hasoref lebal hashtar, meaning the person who burned it, he believes the owner of the shtar, and he admits that that whatever you say is written in the shtar, I admit to that. B'chol ma'asha omer shekach chayik. Whatever you say was written there, I admit. But still, even though he's admitting and he says, yes, what I burned was a shtar, and it had this amount of debt that was owed to you, but he is still patur again, because grama bin izakin is considered to be patur. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rav Dimi Bar Chanina. Rav Dimi Bar Chanina says, Had Rabba machlokas Rabbi Shimon v'Rabbanan. This statement of Rabba, that again, if somebody burns the shtar of his friend, he's going to be patur. It's considered to be grama, and he's patur on the indirect damage. That's actually a machlokas between Rabbi Shimon and the Rabbanan. Rabbi Shimon damar davar hagorm l'mammon k'mammon dami. According to Rabbi Shimon, who says something that causes someone to have to pay money, that's considered like money itself. So mechayiv, he's actually chayiv in that situation, because this is something that causes you to be able to collect the debt. L'Rabbanan da'amri davar. But according to the Rabbanan, who say that just because something causes a person to have to pay money, that's not considered like money, so lo mechayev, so then he would not be chayev. And the Gemara continues, Maskef lo Rav Huna B'rei Rav Yoshua. Rav Huna B'rei Rav Yoshua asks on this, Amor de Shamad le Rabbi Shimon davar hagorm l'mammon k'mammon dami. I understand that Rabbi Shimon holds davar hagorm l'mammon is k'mammon. That's in a specific situation, but davar she'ikaro mammon. That's talking in a situation where there is intrinsic value to the object. Kiderabba, for example, like Rabba said. Tiyama Rabba, because Rabba said, Gazal chametz lifnei Pesach. Let's say a person steals chametz before Pesach. Now the halach is if he steals chametz before Pesach, Pesach comes, that chametz is going to be the chametz is going to be worthless essentially, because you can't get any benefit from the chametz. But the halacha happens to be that in order to pay back what he stole, he could just give back that chametz be'ein. If he still has that chametz after Pesach, even though it's worthless, but he can give back what he stole. So this person stole chametz before Pesach. Now if somebody else comes along and burns that chametz on the holiday itself, so patur, that person who burned the chametz on the holiday is patur, even though by burning the chametz he's causing now that the thief has to actually pay money instead of just returning the chametz itself, but still the person who burned it is patur sha'akol mitzuvim olav levaro, because there it's a mitzvah to destroy it, he's just doing a mitzvah. However, la'achar haPesach, however, let's say he burns the chametz after Pesach, so in that situation there's no mitzvah to destroy the chametz, but on the other hand, he is now causing the other person to have to pay money. That gazlan is not able to just return the chametz, so that's going to be machlokas Rabbi Shimon v'Rabbanan. That's going to be a machlokas between Rabbi Shimon and the Rabbanan. Rabbi Shimon damar davar hagorm l'mammon k'mammon dami. According to Rabbi Shimon, who says that if it causes somebody a monetary obligation, that's like a direct situation of damage in terms of money. That's exactly what's happening over here. This person that burned the chametz is causing the gazlan to have to pay money. That's a direct damage he's going to owe. So chayiv, he's going to be chayiv. However, l'Rabbanan da'amri davar hagorm l'mammon lav k'mammon dami. But according to the Rabbanan, who say that something that causes money is not like money, so patur, he's going to be patur. And so that's talking about something that has intrinsic value. For example, like this chametz does have intrinsic value. But b'davar she'eni karu mammon, but in a situation where it has no intrinsic value, like in this case of the documents, a piece of paper, mi amrinan, would he go so far and say it over there? And the Gemara continues, Amar Ameimar says, Man dedoin dina de garmi. Now, if a person judges cases of garmi is also considered like indirect damage. The Rishonim discuss exactly what is the difference between grama and garmi, but the point is that anyone who holds that you're chayiv on garmi, magvi bei dmei shtarim aliyah, then you would actually be able to collect, that's considered to be garmi, and you would be able to collect what that shtar could have collected, that's considered to be a real damage, and the person who burned the shtar is chayiv. However, uman de lo doin dina de garmi, but if somebody does not judge garmi cases, magvi bei dmei niyora bialma, so then he's only going to have to pay for the piece of paper, that's all the person will be entitled to collect. He won't be able to collect any more than that. And the Gemara continues, Hava Uvda, there was a case like this. V'chaf Yerafram l'Ravashi, and Rafram forced Ravashi to pay because Ravashi had burned the shtar. V'agvi bei ki kashur l'tzalman. He made him collect as if he was paying for a beam that's used for a sculpture, meaning to say he made him pay for the real damages of what that shtar could have collected. And Rashi says, Magvi bei min hasoref kol hashtar sharei garmu lahafsid. Again, we said you will have to pay in such a situation when you burn a shtar if you hold of garmi. V'achvi Rafram l'Ravashi. There was a case where Rafram forced Ravashi shasaref shtar chaveiro bialdusa because he had actually burned a document of his friend when he was younger. V'agvi mine guvainam aliyah. He made him pay. He collected from him a real collection. Kol mashakasa b'shtar, meaning everything that was written in the shtar. Ki kashura l'tzalma, like a beam that's used for a sculpture, meaning piron gomer, meaning a real payment, min ha'idiyas, from the best. Kekora zu hanivcheres, like this beam that is a chosen beam. Mishar koros is better than all the other beams. Lasakin batsura diyuknos, again, that you can use it for various sculptures. We'll also read the previous Rashi, man de doin dina de garmi, Rabbi Meir he. Who is the Tana that judges garmi, that says you're chayiv by garmi? That is Rabbi Meir. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, chametz v'over of Pesach. If you have chametz and Pesach passes and that chametz becomes asur b'hana, it's essentially not worth anything. Omer lo haresh al chalafanecha. The Gazlan can say, take what is yours, meaning he can just return the chametz itself, even though that chametz has no value. And the Gemara says, Man Tana Omrim B'Isurei Hana Harei Shel Chalafanecha. Who's the Tana of our Mishnah that says that by Isurei Hana, like Chametz Shavar Lava Pesach, that the Gazlan can say Harei Shel Chalafanecha, take what is yours, just give back the actual object. Amr of Chisda says, Rabbi Yaakov, the Tana of our Mishnah is Rabbi Yaakov. The Tanya, as we learned in a Brisa, Shorsha Hamis, if you have an ox that kills, if an ox kills a person, it's supposed to be stoned. So Anshelo Nigmar Dino, if there was no final ruling, if there was no verdict yet that this ox has to be stoned, so Machro Machar, Hiktisho Muktosh, Shachto Besaru Mutter, if he sells it, it's considered a good sale. It's not yet Asur Bahana. If he makes it Hektish, it's Hektish. If he shechts it, the meat is Mutter. Hechziru Shomer Labail of Muchser, if a Shomer is watching over that ox and returns it to the original owner, that's considered to be returned, because at this point in time, there was no verdict. However, Misha Nigmar Dino, but once there's a verdict that this shore has to be stoned, so essentially it's not worth anything, so Machro, Eino Machro, in that case, again, if he sells it, it is not going to be a good sale. Hektisho, Eino Muktish, if he makes it Hektish, it's not going to be Hektish. Shachto Besaro Asr, if he shechts it, the meat already is going to be forbidden. Hechziro Shomer Labailov, Eino Muchser, and if a Shomer would return that ox to its original owner, that would not be considered returning anything, because this ox is already set to be stoned. Rabbi Yaakov says, Af Misha Nigmar Dino, even after the verdict, Hechziro Shomer Labailov Muchser, if the Shomer returns it to the original owner, it is considered to be returned. And so Rabbi Yaakov seems to line up with our Mishnah, just like when you return the ox that is supposed to be stoned, it's considered that you're returning something. So too when it comes to Chametz Shavar Lava Pesach, the Gazlan would return it. That's what the Gemara now says. My lav is it not? This is exactly the machlokas in the Brisa. The Rabbi Yaakov Savar Omer B'Surei Hano Harei Shel Chalafanecha. Rabbi Yaakov holds by things where it's prohibited to derive benefit, you can still say Harei Shel Chalafanecha, take what is yours. V'Rabbanan Savri Ein Omer B'Surei Hano Harei Shel Chalafanecha. And the Rabbanan say that we don't say by Surei Hano that a person can say Harei Shel Chalafanecha. And the Gemara says not necessarily. Amar Le Rabba says to him, lo no. The Kuli Alma Amrin B'Surei Hano Harei Shel Chalafanecha. Could be everybody agrees by Surei Hano you can say Harei Shel Chalafanecha. Everybody would agree with what our Mishnah says. Because otherwise, if they're arguing in general about Isurei Hano, whether you can say Harei Shel Chalafanecha, they should argue by Chametz B'Pesach, like our case in the Mishnah. That should be the argument. Why are they arguing only by this case of the shore that's supposed to be stoned? Elama Rabba rather Rabbah says, Hacha begomrin dino shel shor shelo b'fanav kamiflagi. Here this machlokus between the Tana Kamma and Rabbi Yaakov by a shore where you have a verdict on the shore. The actual machlokus is, are you allowed to render a verdict if the shore is not present in front of us? That's actually the machlokus. How does that work? Rabbanan Sabri, because the Rabbanan hold, ein gomrin dino shel shor shelo b'fanav. We wouldn't be able to have a verdict on this ox if the ox is not present. And therefore, since we can't have a verdict on this ox if the ox is not present, so now we have a situation where the shomer has this ox, and if the shomer goes ahead and he returns the ox to the original owner, it's possible the original owner can get out of a verdict by having this ox run away. Because the original owner can say to the shomer, if you would have brought this ox to me, I would have ran it away to the swamp, and there never would have been a verdict. And instead what happened was you didn't bring it to me, and therefore it was brought to Bezdin, and there was a verdict on this ox, and that essentially caused me a loss of money. Now you gave it over to someone, and now I'm not able to successfully win the case, and therefore essentially you caused that this ox would have a verdict that it has to be stoned, and that's why the Rabbanan hold that the shomer is not simply allowed to return the ox and get out of his obligation. For Rabbi Yaakov says, no, Gomrin Dino shel shor shelo b'fanav. We can have a verdict on the ox even if it's not present. Because then he could say to him, Am I avdile? What exactly did I do to you? The fact that I gave it to the bezin didn't make a difference. Sof have a gamri le dina shelo b'fanav. Still at the end, they would have had a verdict anyway, even if the ox was not present. And so therefore, I'm able to simply say, Harei shel chalafanecha, take back your ox. And Rashi explains the imkain, if they were arguing in general, if you could say Harei shel chalafanecha by Surei Hana, to Rabbanan ein omrim that according to Rabbanan you can't say Harei shel chalafanecha in general. Adamiflagi b'shor legabe shomer, instead of arguing by a shomer that's returning the shore that has a verdict, lifilgu nami legabe gazel chametz v'yavar lava pesach. They should argue in general. When a person steals chametz, it's chametz shavar lava pesach. They should argue if you could say Harei shel chalafanecha. So rather, instead, we're saying that everybody agrees you could say Harei shel chalafanecha by Surei Hana, and the machlokus over here is different. But over here, b'shor shehemis hu de'amar ein muchzer, it's only by a shore that kills. That's where the Rabbanan say you can't simply return the shore, meaning the shomer cannot return the shore. Mishum de'amar lei, because he can say to him, the original owner can say to the shomer, Hi iser hana lav iser da'asi alami meilahu kagon chametz v'pesach. This is not some iser that happens automatically like chametz when Pesach comes. There's an automatic iser hana that is chal. Ela'at katalte bi'adayim, but you killed this animal with your hands, meaning you caused it. You, the shomer, caused it to be Asr Bahana, and that's why you're going to owe me. Shavasa lebezin, because you brought it to Bezin. Do you have a gaboy? Because if I had it, I would have let the ox run away, and it would never come before Bezin. There would be no verdict. Avol Seva de Masnis, and now Rashi notes the end of our Mishnah, that Vade Rabbi Yaakov, that actually is certainly Rabbi Yaakov. You can't possibly say the end of our Mishnah is the Rabbanan. Velo Rabbanan, it's got to be Rabbi Yaakov and not the Rabbanan. The Katani Oshaisa Yotzali Sokal, because there actually has our exact case of the Brisa. It has the case of a shore that's being stoned. Omer lo Harei shel chalafanecha, and our Mishnah says you could say Harei shel chalafanecha. That certainly the Rabbanan would disagree. As we're saying right here in this Brisa, the Rabbanan would say you can't simply say Harei shel chalafanecha because it really is this person's fault because he caused that the owner couldn't run the animal away to the swamp. And the Gemara continues, Ashkechei Rav Chisda l'Rabba bar Shmuel. Rav Chisda found Rabba bar Shmuel. Amarle said to him, Tanis midi b'Surei Hana. Did you learn anything that has to do with the Surei Hana? Amarle, he said back to him, and yes, Tanina, we learned in a Brisa as follows. V'heishav esagzela, the pasuk says you have to return the stolen item. Matam and lomar asher gazal. Why does the pasuk go on to say asher gazal? Yachzer ke'ein shegazal. It means you return exactly the item that you stole. Mikan Amram, from here they say, gazal matbeya v'nifsal, if he steals a coin that becomes disqualified, Peirus v'yarkivu, if he steals fruits and they rot, yayin v'hechmetz, if he steals wine that becomes vinegar, truma v'nitmis, if he steals truma and it becomes tamei, chametz v'yavar lava pesach, if he steals chametz and Pesach comes, it's now asur b'ana, behema v'nevda ba'avera, if he steals an animal and an avera is done with the animal, v'shor ad shelo nigmar dino, and an ox before the verdict. In all of these cases, Omer lo Harei shel chalafanecha. You can say to him, Harei shel chalafanecha. That's what the Brisa says. And so the Gemara now says, Man shamat le damar ad shelo nigmar dino in misha nigmar dino lo. Which Tana is the one that makes a distinction and says that before the verdict you can say Haresh al Chalafanecha, but not after the verdict? That's the Rabbanan. That's the Rabbanan in the Brisa we just had before with the Rabbanan and Rabbi Yaakov. The Rabbanan do not allow you to return the shore if there's already been a verdict. Yet it says in this Brisa that Chametz v'avar alav haPesach omer lo Haresh al Chalafanecha, that by Chametz shavar alav haPesach he is able to say Haresh al Chalafanecha. You see, indeed, not like Rav Chisda. You see that we do make a distinction according to the Rabbanan between Chametz shavar alav haPesach, between a Surei Hana that you could say Haresh al Chalafanecha, and this one case by the shore where there's a verdict. There you're not able to say Haresh al Chalafanecha because there it is sort of this person's fault that he didn't allow the original owner to run that animal away to the swamp. And the Gemara says, Amar Lei, Rav Chisda said back, Imashkachaslu, if you found such a thing, lo teimaluhu v'lo midi, or rather, Imashkachaslu, if you find the Talmidim, if you find the Bnei HaYeshiva, lo teimaluhu v'lo midi, don't tell them anything about this brisa because it's a refutation to what I say. And Rashi explains, Ashkecher Rav Chisda Mahader Amasnisin, the Nahava Plugsa Chametz Pesach Lu'ukme Lemilse, the time of the Rabbanan Mishum Dein Omer B'Surei Hana Reishal Chalafanecha. Rav Chisda wants to try to say that in our Mishnah the machlokus really is a general machlokus whether you can say Hareishal Chalafanecha by Surei Hana, and according to the Rabbanan it's just in general you can't say Hareishal Chalafanecha by Surei Hana. And of course this brisa proves that wrong. The Rabbanan say you could say Hareishal Chalafanecha in general by Surei Hana. It's just an exception by the case of a shore with a verdict that it's going to be stoned, and that's why Rav Chisda said, if you find the Bnei HaYeshiva, lo teimalu v'lo midi, don't tell them anything about this brayso, mishum dechadu the mishkechi tiyuf telamilsa, because they're going to say that there is now a refutation. They're going to realize there's a refutation against what I said. And the Gemara continues with the Mishnah, Nosan le'umnin l'saken, if somebody gives something to a craftsman to repair, the kilkalu, and then the craftsman damages the item, chayavin l'shalim. So the craftsman is going to be chayav to pay. Nosan l'chora sheda tevo migdol, if a person gives to a carpenter a chest or a box or a cabinet l'saken to fix it, the kilkalu, and instead he damages it, chayav l'shalim, is going to be chayav to pay. V'habanoi shekibul olav listor asakosel, if a builder, he accepts upon himself a job to destroy a wall, v'shibur ha'avanim, but then he ends up breaking the stones of that wall, o shezik, or he damages them, again chayiv l'shalim is going to be chayiv to pay. Hayasoser mitzad zeh, if he's destroying from one side of the wall, v'nafal mitzad acher, falls on the other side, pater, in that case he is actually pater. However, v'machmas hamaka chayiv, but if it's because of him striking it, that's why it breaks, so then he's going to be chayiv. And the idea of the distinction at the end of the Mishnah is soser mitzad zeh, nafal mitzad acher, that's already considered to be an onus. If it falls on the other side, that's why he's pater. But if it's machmas hamaka, if it's due to the fact that he was striking against it, that causes it to break, in that case that's not considered an onus, and he is chayiv. And the Gemara says, Amar Ravasi says, Lo shanu el shanosan l'choresh sheida tevo migdal. The case of our Mishnah is only in a situation where he gives the carpenter the chest or the box or the cabinet, l'nayitz bohen mismor, to put a nail into them, v'noatz bohen mismor, he puts the nail in v'shivra and he breaks it, then he's responsible to pay for these vessels. Avol nosan l'choresh eitzim lasos sheida tevo migdal. Let's say he gives the carpenter wood to make a sheida tevo migdal, v'yasameyan sheida tevo migdal, and the carpenter makes a sheida tevo migdal, v'shivra, and then he breaks it. So potter, then he's potter in terms of the vessels. If he does some damage to the wood, he would have to pay for the wood. But the vessels are still considered to be his. He has not actually given the vessels back to the original owner, and if they're not the original owners, then he hasn't really damaged the original owner's kalim. So that's why he's potter on the sheida tevo migdal. That's what the Gemara explains. My time, and what's the reason? Uman kona b'shvach kli, that a craftsman acquires that which he improves in the vessel. Again, it's still, that improvement is considered to be the craftsman's at that point in time. He hasn't actually given the sheida tevo migdal back to the original owner, therefore he's only responsible on the damage that happens to the wood. And the Gemara continues, Tanan, we learned in our Mishnah, Nasan lu'umnin v'kilkalo, if you give something to the craftsman and he breaks it, chayav and l'shalim, they have to pay. My lav, is it not? The yoiv lu'etzim isn't the case where the person gave him wood, he created a vessel, and he's chayiv on the damage to that vessel. And the Gemara says, Lo, no, sheida tevo migdal. We're talking about a case where he actually gave him the vessel, he gave him the sheida tevo migdal. But the Gemara says, Hamid Katani Seifa, but the Mishnah goes on to say, Sheida Tevo Migdal, a case where he actually gives him a Sheida Tevo Migdal. It says he gives him a Sheida Tevo Migdal to fix it and he breaks it, he's chayiv to pay. But if that's the case of the end of the Mishnah, of the coming case of the Mishnah, Mechlal de Reisha Eitzamami, doesn't that sound like the Reisha of the Mishnah where it just says he gave something to a craftsman to fix and he ruined it and the craftsman is chayiv to pay? Isn't that just talking about wood? And the Gemara says, no, that's not talking just about wood. Rather, Perushe Kamefarish La Rather, the Mishnah goes on to explain its original case. Sheda Teva Umigdal is an explanation of the case we just said in the line before. Meaning, Ketzad, how so? Nasan L'umnan, Ketzad, how so? That, Nasan L'umnan L'sakin, V'kilkul L'chayav L'shalim. How do we find the case where if a person gives something to a craftsman to fix and he breaks it, is chayev? This would be the following example. Kagon, for example, Shanasan L'choresh, Sheda Teva Umigdal, he gives to a carpenter the Sheda Teva Umigdal, and that would be a situation where he'd have to pay if he damages the Sheda Teva Umigdal. And the Gemara says, it actually makes sense to say that the Mishnah by Sheda Teva Umigdal is just explaining what it said in the first line. Because if you think that the first line of the Mishnah is talking about where he just gives him wood, so that doesn't make sense to have both cases. If it's already saying that if he just gives wood, that the person is chayav to pay even for the vessels that was made, and we don't say that the uman acquires all the improvement that he made in the vessels. So Sheda Teva Migdal, do we even need to say he's responsible if he damages a Sheda Teva Migdal if he was actually given the vessel? Of course, that would be true. There'd be no reason to say both cases. The Gemara says that's not necessarily a proof. If that's your only proof that that's how to read the Mishnah, that's not necessarily true. Because Tana Seifa Legaluye Reisha, you could actually say that the second case of the Mishnah, Sheda Teva Migdal, is there in order for us to understand what the first case was talking about. Meaning Shelo Toma Reisha Sheda Teva Migdal, that you shouldn't think that in the beginning case of the Mishnah it's only a case where he gave him a Sheda Teva Migdal Aval Eitzim Lo, but by wood he wouldn't be responsible for the vessels. So Tana Seifa Sheda Teva Migdal, that's why the end of the Mishnah has the case of Sheda Teva Migdal Mechlal de Reisha Eitzim, that clearly implies that the first line is talking about Eitzim, and therefore and Va'afilu Hachi Chayav L'Shalim, and nevertheless you're chayav to pay for the vessels even where it was just wood, and so therefore it's not necessarily a proof that you should read the Mishnah in a Ketzad fashion where it's giving you an example of what it was talking about in the first line. And the Gemara continues, Lema Messiah, let's say a support for him. This is a support for Ravasi, who says that an uman is kon in the shvach kli. Hanose in semer letzeva, if a person gives wool over to somebody who's going to dye the wool, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Tes Amud Aleph.